Alright, so picture this. It was supposed to be the start of something amazing. The big leap, the transformation of our perfectly fine but utterly bland house into the dream home we'd meticulously planned for years. We'd saved, we'd researched, we'd pored over Pinterest boards until our eyes blurred. Every detail, from the open concept kitchen to the spa-like master bath, was etched into our minds. We hired what we thought was a reputable contractor, a guy with a smooth talk and a portfolio that looked just impressive enough to convince us. Little did we know, we were about to embark on a journey that would redefine the word nightmare and ultimately redefine me. The initial days were a blur of excitement. Walls came down, dust filled the air, and the skeleton of our new vision began to emerge. There was a thrill in seeing the space open up, the light pouring into areas that had always been dim. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cracks started to show. Not in the walls, not yet, but in the process. Missed deadlines, vague answers, materials showing up late, or, worse, being the wrong kind entirely. We tried to be understanding, to give the benefit of the doubt. Renovations are messy, they're complicated, things happen. That's what everyone tells you, right? But what was happening here felt different. It felt off. The first major red flag, the one that truly jolted me awake, was the plumbing. We were replacing all the old galvanized pipes with PEX, a modern, flexible plastic tubing. I walked in one afternoon, after the crew was supposedly done for the day, and saw a section of new PEX running horizontally across a joist, not through it, but across it, completely unsupported for about 6 feet. It sagged like a tired hammock. And it wasn't just one pipe, there were several. It looked like someone had just tossed it up there and hoped for the best. My heart sank. This wasn't just a small oversight. This was fundamental incompetence. Water flow, drainage, structural integrity, all compromised. I pointed it out, politely at first. The contractor shrugged it off, saying it would be fine once the drywall was up. Fine? It would be a plumbing disaster waiting to happen. A slow leak or a burst pipe drowning our brand new ceiling. Then came the electrical. We were upgrading the entire house, adding recessed lighting, new outlets, dedicated circuits for modern appliances. I'm not an electrician, but I'd done enough DIY projects to know that wires generally need to be properly secured, neatly run, and certainly not stripped so aggressively that bare copper was exposed inches from the junction box. I found wires bundled haphazardly, connections that looked like they were done by a toddler with a butter knife, and outlets mounted crookedly, their boxes barely secured to the studs. One evening, after a particularly frustrating conversation, where the contractor assured me everything was up to code, I pulled out my phone and started filming. I documented every single exposed wire, every loose connection, every crooked box. It felt like I was building a case against him, not just supervising a renovation. The trust, once so carefully placed, was now completely shattered. It was replaced by a cold, hard knot of dread in my stomach. The walls themselves became a monument to carelessness. What was supposed to be perfectly plumb and level became a funhouse mirror reflection of what a wall should be. I remember standing in the living room, holding a 4-foot level against what was supposed to be a straight new wall. The bubble was so far off center, it practically kissed the edge of the glass. I moved the level a foot over, and the bubble shifted again in a different direction. It wasn't just out of plumb, it was wavy, like a gentle ocean swell. Drywall was hung without proper backing, leaving soft spots in areas where it clearly wouldn't hold paint or even a picture frame securely. Corners were rounded where they should have been sharp, and sharp where they should have been smooth. It was a chaotic mess, a testament to speed over skill, to cutting corners at every possible turn. Every surface, every angle, screamed neglect. The final straw, the absolute breaking point, came with the flooring. We had chosen a beautiful engineered hardwood for the main living areas. It was delivered, stacked in the house to acclimate, and then, without any warning, the crew started laying it. I walked in to find them nailing it directly into the subfloor. No vapor barrier, no underlayment, no expansion gaps along the edges. Just nail after nail, straight into the wood. I stood there, dumbfounded. This was a hardwood floor, not a cheap laminate. It needed to breathe, to expand and contract with humidity changes. Without proper installation, it would buckle, crack, and cup within a year, if not sooner. I tried to explain this, to show them the manufacturer's instructions. The contractor just waved his hand, dismissing my concerns. "We've done hundreds of floors like this, lady. It'll be fine." Fine? It would be a ruined floor, a wasted investment of thousands of dollars. That was the moment, the exact moment when something inside me snapped. The frustration, the anger, the sheer disbelief, at the level of disregard for our home and our money, it all coalesced into a fierce, unwavering determination. I looked at the crooked walls, the exposed wires, the sagging pipes, the improperly laid floor, and I made a decision. A terrifying, exhilarating, life-altering decision. I fired him. I told him and his crew to pack up their tools, gather their things, and get out of my house. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the shouting, the threats, the demands for final payment for work that was demonstrably shoddy. But I held my ground. I had documented everything. Every flaw, every code violation, every conversation. I knew my rights, predictably, offered little in the way of a template. Its original wiring, a haphazard tangle of cloth-insulated wires and antiquated fuse boxes, was a fire hazard waiting to happen. It all had to go. Every single strand. The demolition of the old electrical system was a surprisingly cathartic process. Stripping away the brittle, discolored wires felt like excising a disease. It was a cleansing, making way for a modern, safe, and efficient system. Then came the meticulous task of running new lines. Spools of copper wire, thick and unyielding, became my constant companions. I learned the language of Romex, the subtle art of notching studs without compromising their strength, the patience required to thread wires through impossibly tight spaces, often contorting my body into positions that would make a yoga instructor wince. There were moments of profound frustration. A wire snagging just inches from its destination, requiring a complete reroute. A miscalculation in a junction box, leading to a tangled mess that took hours to untangle. The sheer volume of wire, hundreds of feet, seemed endless. My hands grew calloused, my fingers nimble from stripping insulation and twisting connections. But with each successful run, each perfectly installed box, a quiet satisfaction bloomed. I was not just installing wires, I was weaving the very nervous system of a new life into the old bones of this house. Each circuit was a pathway for energy, a promise of light and warmth and connectivity. It was a silent, intricate ballet of copper and insulation, a hidden network designed to serve, unseen but essential. The rough-in phase, as it was called, felt like the creation of an unseen circulatory system, a vital infrastructure that would soon be cloaked behind walls and ceilings, yet forever powering the home's beating heart. The process of running those lines was a meditation in itself. There was a rhythm to it. Measure, cut, strip, pull, staple. Measure, cut, strip, pull, staple. My hands learned the precise amount of pressure needed to strip insulation without nicking the copper, the perfect twist to secure a wire nut, the satisfying click of a staple gun sinking home. I became intimately familiar with every stud, every joist, every nook and cranny of the house itself. I learned its quirks, its old repairs, the places where a previous builder had taken a shortcut, the spots where the wood was unusually dense, or where a knot might make drilling a challenge. This was no longer just a structure I was working on. It was becoming a living map in my mind, a three-dimensional blueprint etched by sweat and focus. Each run of wire was a problem to solve, a puzzle to unravel. How to get from the main panel in the basement, up through 2 floors, and into the ceiling fixture of the master bedroom without destroying existing plaster or compromising structural integrity. It required foresight, patience, and often, a willingness to contort my body into positions that would make a yoga instructor wince. I spent hours on my back in the crawl space, dust motes dancing in the beam of my headlamp, pulling cable through narrow joist bays, my arms aching with the effort of pushing and pulling. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood, a primal aroma that spoke of the house's deep roots in the soil. Then there was the attic, a forgotten realm of blown-in insulation, splintered lath, and the ghosts of old wires. Climbing up there was like entering a different era. The heat was stifling even on a cool day, and the insulation clung to everything, making me itch from head to toe. But it was often the only way to drop lines down to the second floor, to feed power to new outlets and switches. I learned to move carefully, balancing on joists, trying not to put a foot through the ceiling below. The silence up there was profound, broken only by the scritch-scratch of my tools, the occasional creak of the old timbers, and the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. It was a place of solitude, a space where time seemed to slow, and the only imperative was the next foot of cable, the next drilled hole. The existing electrical system had been a patchwork, a testament to decades of ad hoc fixes and questionable additions. Knob and tube wiring, still active in some forgotten corners, mingled uneasily with brittle cloth-insulated Romex and early versions of armored cable. My first task had been to systematically decommission and remove every trace of the old. It was a tedious, dirty job, stripping away layers of history, pulling out wires whose insulation crumbled at the touch, leaving trails of black dust. Each length removed felt like purging an old illness, making way for the clean, robust arteries of the new system. It was a physical manifestation of cleansing, a necessary step to ensure the house's future health and safety. I immersed myself in the National Electrical Code, a thick tome of regulations that felt like both a burden and a Bible. Every connection had to be precise, every box properly sized, every circuit protected. Grounding, bonding, GFCI, and AFCI protection. These were not just abstract concepts but critical safeguards against fire and shock. The precision required was absolute. There was no room for error, no shortcut that wasn't also a compromise on safety. It taught me a new level of respect for the unseen work, the meticulous planning that goes into making a modern home function safely. Each junction box became a miniature masterpiece of organization, wires neatly stripped, twisted, and capped, labeled for clarity, ready for inspection. The drilling was relentless. Hole after hole through studs and joists, the drill bit whining, then biting into the wood, showering me with fragrant sawdust. Sometimes I hit a nail, sparking briefly before the bit dulled. Other times the wood was so old and hard it felt like drilling into stone. My hands grew strong, calloused, and constantly covered in a fine layer of grime. My shoulders ached, my knees protested, but there was a deep, primal satisfaction in the physical exertion, in the tangible progress I saw each day. There were moments of frustration, of course, a wire snagging just out of reach, a drill battery dying mid-hole, a measurement that was just slightly off. These were the tests of patience, the moments when the house seemed to resist, to push back against its transformation. But each hurdle overcome brought with it a surge of quiet triumph. Fishing a particularly stubborn wire through a long, inaccessible wall cavity using only a coat hanger and sheer willpower felt like a major victory. Completing a complex three-way switch circuit and then testing it to find all the lights working perfectly was a small, personal celebration. The days blurred into a rhythm of work, a cycle of planning, execution, and review. I would arrive at first light, the house silent and cool, and work until dusk, when the shadows grew long and the air turned crisp. In the absence of other voices, I found myself talking to the house, explaining my intentions, apologizing for the noise, thanking it for its resilience. It sounds foolish, perhaps, but in that deep solitude, the house ceased to be merely an object and became something more, a silent companion, a partner in this grand endeavor. I learned to anticipate the house's reactions, to understand its structural language. The creak of a floorboard told me where the weight was distributed, the subtle shift in sound when drilling indicated a change in wood density. I was learning to read the house, to communicate with it on a level beyond words. This understanding wasn't just practical, it was profound. It fostered a sense of belonging, of being intricately woven into the fabric of the place. This wasn't just a house I was renovating, it was a house I was becoming part of. And it, in turn, was becoming a part of me. My vision for the house was not just about functionality. It was about creating spaces that felt right, that resonated with warmth and comfort. Each light fixture location was carefully considered, each outlet placement designed for convenience and future needs. I imagined the life that would unfold within these walls. Reading in a softly lit corner, cooking a meal in a well-appointed kitchen, the hum of appliances, the glow of a bedside lamp. These wires, though hidden, were the conduits for all that future life, the silent enablers of comfort and connection. As the electrical rough-in progressed, room by room, floor by floor, the house began to feel less like a hollow shell and more like a nascent organism. The network of wires, like nerves, was giving it sensation, the ability to respond to touch, to light up, to warm. The main electrical panel, once a blank slate, slowly filled with neatly terminated circuits, each breaker a tiny guardian of a specific part of the house. It was a complex symphony of connections, all leading back to this central brain. There were moments of pure, unadulterated joy. The first time I temporarily connected a circuit to a power source, just to test a run, and a bare bulb hanging from a temporary fixture flickered to life, casting a warm, dusty glow across a previously dark room. It was a small, almost insignificant event, but it felt like witnessing the spark of creation, seeing the house breathe for the first time. That single bulb, dangling from a wire, represented the promise of all the light and life to come. It was a beacon, a tangible sign that the house was waking up. This phase of the renovation was also a journey of self-discovery. Working alone, day in and day out, forced a confrontation with my own thoughts, my own limits, my own resilience. The physical demands were immense, pushing my body to its boundaries. The mental demands were equally challenging, requiring constant problem-solving, meticulous planning, and unwavering focus. But in overcoming these challenges, I found a strength I hadn't fully recognized, a deep well of determination. I learned to appreciate the small victories. A perfectly straight run of conduit, a junction box wired impeccably, the satisfying click of a switch that controlled exactly what it was supposed to. These weren't grand gestures, but they were the bedrock of quality, the silent assurances that the hidden work was as sound as the visible. And knowing the integrity of what lay beneath the surfaces, gave me a profound sense of satisfaction. The house, in turn, seemed to respond to my efforts. Its old wood, once silent and still, seemed to hum with a new, subtle energy. The dust, though ever present, felt less like decay and more like the byproduct of creation. The spaces, once empty and echoing, began to hold the imprint of my labor, the quiet energy of purpose. It was a symbiotic relationship, a dance between human will and architectural form. As the final circuits were pulled, the last boxes installed, and the main panel wired up, a sense of quiet accomplishment settled over me. The electrical rough-in was complete. The house was now fully networked, its circulatory and nervous systems robust and ready. It was a complex web of copper and plastic, a testament to countless hours of labor, planning, and meticulous execution. Soon, this intricate work would be hidden behind insulation and drywall, unseen but forever vital, quietly serving the life within. This completion marked a significant milestone. It was the end of one major chapter and the beginning of another. The house was no longer just bones. It had a pulse, a latent energy waiting to be fully unleashed. The next steps would be insulation, then the enclosing of the walls. I knew that covering up all this detailed work would be bittersweet. On one hand, it would mean progress, the house moving closer to completion. On the other hand, it would mean obscuring the intricate tapestry I had woven, the hidden artistry of the infrastructure. But that was the nature of it, I realized. The most essential work often remains unseen, its value only truly recognized in its reliable, silent functioning. The house was ready to be clothed, to take on its finished form, but I would always know the hidden heart beating within. The house was ready to be clothed, to take on its finished form, but I would always know the hidden heart beating within. The next phase was insulation, a task that promised to transform the skeletal structure into something more substantial, more protective. Truckloads of insulation bats arrived, bulky bundles of fiberglass that looked deceptively soft but carried a hidden menace of itchiness. Donning a full Tyvek suit, respirator, and gloves became my new ritual. The process was straightforward in theory. Cut the bats to size, fit them snugly between the studs, joists, and rafters, and staple the vapor barrier in place. In practice, it was a slow, meticulous, and physically demanding job. Every cut had to be precise, every gap filled to prevent thermal bridging. I worked from the bottom up, filling wall cavities, then moved to the ceiling, a particularly awkward and neck-straining endeavor. The air in the house grew thick with fine glass fibers. Even with the respirator, I could feel the microscopic irritation on any exposed skin. It was a constant battle against the itch, a testament to the material's effectiveness in trapping air. Yet, with each bat I installed, a palpable change occurred. The raw, echoing space began to absorb sound. Outside noises, once sharp and clear, became muted. The wind no longer whistled through unseen gaps with the same intensity. A quiet hush settled over the house, a sense of containment and warmth even before the heating system was fully operational. It felt like I was wrapping the house in a thick, protective blanket, preparing it for the elements, for the lives it would shelter. This was the moment the house truly began to hold its breath, to gather its energy, preparing to become a sanctuary. It was a tiring, monotonous task, but the growing sense of solidity and silence was its own reward. With the insulation complete, the house stood ready for its skin. The drywall. This was the moment the rooms would truly take shape, transitioning from abstract spaces defined by framing to solid, enclosed volumes. The delivery of drywall sheets was an event in itself. Stacks of heavy, unwieldy boards, each weighing a considerable amount, were carefully maneuvered into the house. I had opted for a slightly heavier gauge drywall for better soundproofing in certain areas, adding to the challenge. Hanging drywall is a brutal, unforgiving job, especially when working alone. Each sheet had to be lifted, held in place against the ceiling or wall, and screwed securely into the studs. My shoulders ached, my arms burned, and my neck developed a permanent crick from looking up. I devised various makeshift lifts and props to help support the sheets, but there was no escaping the sheer physical exertion. The dust, a fine white powder, became ubiquitous, clinging to everything, coating my hair, my clothes, and the very air I breathed. My respirator became a permanent fixture on my face, and my eyes, even behind safety glasses, felt gritty by the end of each day. The first few sheets were slow, awkward, and riddled with minor errors, but with practice, a rhythm emerged. I learned to anticipate the weight, to pivot the large sheets with less strain, to drive screws with a practiced hand that didn't strip the paper. Walls began to materialize, then ceilings. What was once an open framework was systematically enclosed, room by room. The house transformed dramatically. The vast, echoing cavern of the interior broke down into discrete spaces. A living room, a kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms. Each room, once framed by mere lines of wood, now had a tangible presence, a defined boundary. but hanging the sheets was only the beginning. The real artistry and the true test of patience lay in the finishing, taping and mudding. This was the delicate dance of concealing seams, screw heads, and imperfections, transforming a patchwork of gypsum boards into smooth, continuous surfaces. I watched countless online tutorials, read books, and spoke to experienced finishers. The first layer of mud, applied with a wide taping knife, was a clumsy affair, full of ridges and unevenness. The tape, designed to reinforce the seams, seemed to fight against me, bubbling and creasing. It was frustrating work, demanding a light touch and a steady hand that I initially lacked. Each layer required drying time, followed by sanding. The sanding was the worst. It generated an even finer, more pervasive dust than the cutting and hanging. The house became a white cloud, every surface coated in a powdery film. My lungs, despite the respirator, felt the impact. But with each successive layer of mud, each careful sanding, the seams began to disappear. The corners, once sharp and vulnerable, were reinforced and smoothed. The walls, slowly but surely, became a seamless canvas. There was a meditative quality to the repetitive strokes of the knife, the slow reveal of perfection beneath the mess. It was a process of gradual refinement, of erasing the evidence of construction, preparing the surfaces for their final adornment. The culmination of the drywall phase was a profound moment. Stepping back, I saw not a collection of boards, but proper rooms. The light, once streaming through open studs, now bounced off smooth, continuous surfaces, creating a softer, more diffused glow. The house felt contained, solid, and utterly ready for the next layer of its identity. The dust, though still present, felt like the residue of a significant transformation, a tangible marker of progress. I could finally envision furniture, personal belongings, and the daily rhythms of life unfolding within these now defined spaces. With the drywall complete, the house was a blank slate, a pure white canvas awaiting color and texture. The next logical step was priming, followed by painting. This was a phase one had anticipated with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Excitement because it meant finally injecting personality into the stark white walls. Trepidation because it was a highly visible task, where every brushstroke and roller mark would be on display. Priming was a relatively straightforward process, albeit a labor-intensive one. It involved applying a uniform coat of primer to all the drywall surfaces, sealing the porous gypsum, and providing a consistent base for the finish coats of paint. The smell of the primer, a sharp, chemical scent, filled the air, replacing the drywall dust with a new olfactory signature of progress. I worked methodically, room by room, ensuring full coverage, cutting in carefully around corners and edges. The primer brought out any lingering imperfections in the drywall finish, highlighting areas that needed a final touch-up of mud or sanding. It was a last chance to refine the canvas before committing to color. Choosing the paint colors had been a surprisingly lengthy and introspective process. I had collected countless swatches, taped them to the walls, and observed them at different times of day, under varying light conditions. The way a color shifted from morning light to afternoon sun, or from artificial light to natural daylight, was fascinating. Each room, I felt, deserved its own character, yet the overall palette needed to flow harmoniously throughout the house. I leaned towards a calm, earthy palette, colors that would evoke a sense of tranquility and warmth, allowing the natural light and future furnishings to be the stars. Soft greens for the living areas, a muted blue for the bedroom, and warm grays for the bathrooms. The first stroke of actual color was a moment of quiet ceremony. Dipping the roller into the paint tray, feeling the weight of the paint saturate the nap, and then applying it to the primed wall felt like an act of creation. The white wall instantly transformed, absorbing the new hue, coming alive. The paint went on smoothly, covering the primer with a satisfying richness. The smell of the paint, less harsh than the primer, was now infused with the promise of home. Painting became a rhythmic, almost meditative activity. The steady roll of the brush, the smooth glide of the roller, the careful cutting in with a smaller brush around trim and ceiling lines. My arm developed a new kind of muscle memory, learning the optimal pressure, the perfect amount of paint to load. I listened to music, or sometimes just to the quiet hum of the house as I worked, lost in the repetitive motion. Each coat brought a deeper saturation of color, a greater sense of finish. The walls shed their utilitarian starkness and began to breathe with personality. There were moments of frustration, of course, a drip here, an uneven edge there, the inevitable splatters on the floor despite drop cloths, but these were minor setbacks, easily corrected. The overall feeling was one of immense satisfaction. As each room received its final coat, the transformation was undeniable. The house was no longer just a structure. It was beginning to feel like a home. The colors chosen with such care now enveloped the spaces, influencing the mood, defining the atmosphere. I spent evenings just sitting in the newly painted rooms, watching how the fading light played across the surfaces, imagining the life that would soon fill these spaces. The paint, once a simple liquid in a can, had become the very skin of the house, a testament to its emerging identity. With the walls painted, the house felt much closer to completion, but it was still missing a crucial element: the floors. The subfloor, though sturdy, was a temporary surface. Now it was time to lay down the finished flooring that would define the feel and acoustics of each room. I had chosen a mix of materials: warm, wide-plank engineered hardwood for the main living areas and bedrooms, and durable, elegant porcelain tile for the kitchen, bathrooms, and entryway. The tile installation came first. It was a precise, messy, and physically demanding job. Preparing the subfloor involved laying down a cement board underlayment, meticulously screwing it down to create a stable, unyielding surface. Then came the mortar. Mixing large batches of thin-set mortar, spreading it evenly with a notched trowel, and carefully placing each tile was an exercise in patience and precision. Each tile had to be perfectly level, with consistent spacing maintained by plastic spacers. The weight of the tiles, the constant kneeling and bending, and the need for absolute accuracy made for long, tiring days. I started in the entryway, then moved to the kitchen and bathrooms. The cutting of tiles, particularly for irregular shapes around corners or fixtures, required a wet saw, a noisy machine that sprayed water and tile dust. It was a slow process, but as the grid of tiles began to spread across the floors, a sense of permanence settled in. The cool, solid feel of the porcelain underfoot was instantly satisfying. Once the mortar cured, the grouting began, filling the spaces between the tiles with a contrasting or complementary color. This was another messy yet transformative step, as the individual tiles suddenly coalesced into a unified, waterproof surface. The transformation was dramatic. The utilitarian subfloor was gone, replaced by a beautiful, resilient surface. Next came the engineered hardwood. This was a different kind of precision. The subfloor needed to be perfectly clean and level. I decided on a floating installation, which involved laying down a moisture barrier and then carefully clicking the planks together. The first few rows were critical, establishing the straightness and alignment for the entire floor. I learned to use a tapping block and mallet to gently persuade the planks into place, ensuring tight seams. Cutting the planks to fit around doorways and corners required a miter saw, and the rhythm of measuring, cutting, and clicking became my daily mantra. The sound of the house changed with the installation of the hardwood. Footsteps, once echoing on the bare subfloor, now had a softer, warmer resonance. The grain of the wood, with its natural variations and subtle imperfections, brought an organic warmth to the living spaces. It was a tangible connection to nature, a grounding element that immediately made the rooms feel more inviting and complete. The process of laying each plank, seeing the floor gradually unfurl across the room, was deeply rewarding. It was like weaving a tapestry, each piece contributing to the overall pattern and texture. By the time the last plank was laid, the floors gleamed under the burgeoning light. I walked barefoot across the smooth wood and cool tile, feeling the different textures beneath my feet, a small but significant luxury. The floors were more than just surfaces to walk on. They were a foundation, literally and figuratively, for the life that would unfold here. They anchored the painted walls, giving definition and purpose to each room. The house was no longer just a collection of finished walls. It now had a firm, beautiful ground to stand upon. With the floors in, the house began to feel truly habitable. The next major step was the installation of interior doors and trim. These elements, often considered mere details, are in fact crucial in defining the character and finish of a home. They provide visual breaks, frame views, and add a layer of architectural refinement that elevates a space from functional to elegant. The interior doors arrived pre-hung in their frames, which simplified the installation considerably, but still required precision. Each door had to be plumb, level, and square within its opening, ensuring smooth operation and proper latching. I started with the main entry points, then moved to the bedrooms and bathrooms. The process involved shimming the frames, securing them to the rough openings, and then testing the swing and closure repeatedly. It was a delicate balance of brute force and fine adjustment. The satisfying click of a properly installed door latch, the smooth glide of the door on its hinges, was a small victory each time. Once installed, the doors immediately created a sense of privacy and enclosure, transforming open doorways into defined thresholds. Next came the trim, windowsills, door casings, and baseboards. This was where the house truly began to shed its raw utilitarian skin and take on a more polished appearance. I had chosen a simple, clean profile for the trim, allowing the lines of the architecture to speak for themselves. The miter saw became my constant companion, its blade making precise, angled cuts to create seamless corners. Each piece of trim had to be measured meticulously, cut accurately, and then carefully nailed into place. The windowsills were particularly satisfying. They provided a solid ledge, a place for plants or decorative items, and instantly made the windows feel complete. The door casings framed the doorways, drawing attention to the transitions between rooms. But it was the baseboards that had the most dramatic effect. Running along the bottom of every wall, they covered the expansion gap of the flooring, protected the lower walls from scuffs, and, most importantly, tied the entire room together. The continuous line of the baseboard created a visual anchor, giving the walls a finished, grounded appearance. Working with the trim was a slower, more deliberate process than some of the earlier phases. It required a steady hand, a keen eye for detail, and an appreciation for craftsmanship. Each joint had to be tight, each nail sunk flush. Once installed, the trim needed to be caulked, sealing any tiny gaps between the wood and the drywall, creating a seamless transition. This was followed by a final coat of paint, blending the trim into the overall color scheme, making it an integral part of the room's design. As the trim went in, the house began to feel less like a construction site and more like a home. The hard edges softened, the transitions became smoother, and the overall aesthetic became more refined. The doors and trim were the quiet architects of definition, shaping the perception of space and adding a layer of subtle elegance. I could now walk from room to room, feeling the distinct character of each space, guided by these newly installed architectural elements. The house was no longer just a shell. It was a series of connected, beautifully defined environments, each waiting to be filled with life. With the interior doors and trim in place, the house was nearing a state of functional completion. The next significant milestones were the installation of cabinetry and countertops, particularly in the kitchen and bathrooms. These were the workhorses of the home, the spaces where daily life would unfold, demanding both aesthetic appeal and robust functionality. The kitchen cabinetry was the heart of this phase. I had spent countless hours designing the layout, considering workflow, storage needs, and appliance placement. The arrival of the cabinet boxes, carefully wrapped and stacked, was a moment of anticipation. Unpacking them, I could already feel the quality of the wood, the precision of the joinery. Installation began with the base cabinets. This involved careful leveling, shimming each unit until it was perfectly plumb and square, then securely fastening it to the wall studs and to adjacent cabinets. The process was slow and methodical, requiring constant checks with a level and tape measure. Each cabinet had to align perfectly with its neighbors, creating a continuous, unbroken line. Once the base cabinets were in place, the upper cabinets followed. These were more challenging, requiring careful lifting and temporary supports while I fastened them to the wall. The height had to be consistent, the spacing even, and the alignment flawless. As the cabinets took shape, the kitchen began to transform from an empty space into a functional workspace. The empty boxes, once just storage, now defined the flow of the room, creating pathways and more importantly, I knew I couldn't let this travesty continue. The house was a disaster zone. Worse than it had been when we'd started, because now it was a disaster zone filled with partially completed, incorrectly installed, and utterly useless new materials. It was a shell of a home, a monument to a contractor's negligence. For a few days after they left, I just walked through it, a hollow ache in my chest. What had we done? How could we fix this? The thought of starting over, of undoing everything, was overwhelming. The financial strain, the emotional toll, it all felt too much. But then, as I stood in the wreckage of what was supposed to be our dream kitchen, a different feeling began to emerge. A quiet, stubborn resolve. I realized that if I wanted it done right, truly right, I would have to do it myself. Or at least, oversee every single step, with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I had to become the expert. I had to become the project manager, the laborer, the quality control specialist. This wasn't just about saving money anymore. It was about reclaiming our home, reclaiming our peace of mind, and proving to myself that I could overcome this monumental challenge. It was about turning a contractor nightmare into a personal triumph. My first step was damage assessment, a truly painful exercise in confronting the full scope of the disaster. I armed myself with a notebook, a tape measure, a level, a flashlight, and a camera. I went room by room, systematically documenting every single problem. It was like an archaeological dig, but instead of unearthing ancient artifacts, I was uncovering layers of incompetence. I started in the main living area, where the open concept had been botched. The ceiling joists, exposed where a load-bearing wall had been removed, were supposed to have been reinforced with a proper beam. Instead, the contractor had used undersized lumber, shimming it with scraps of wood and calling it a day. The floor above had a noticeable bounce. This was a structural issue, a serious one that could compromise the entire house. My heart pounded as I wrote it down, realizing the depth of the fix required. This wasn't just cosmetic. Next, the plumbing. I spent hours tracing every single PEX line, noting where it sagged, where it was improperly supported, where connections looked suspect. I learned about proper manifold systems, about securing lines every 32 inches, about ensuring a slight slope for drainage. What I found was a chaotic spaghetti junction of pipes, some running uphill, some crossing each other unnecessarily, creating potential friction points and reducing water pressure. It was a mess that would need to be completely ripped out and redone. Every single line. The sheer scale of it felt like trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. The electrical was even more terrifying. Beyond the exposed wires and loose connections, I discovered circuits that were overloaded, improper grounding, and zones for cooking. Once the base cabinets were in place, the upper cabinets followed. These were more challenging, requiring careful lifting and temporary supports while I fastened them to the wall. The height had to be consistent, the spacing even, and the alignment flawless. As the cabinets took shape, the kitchen began to transform from an empty space into a functional workspace. The empty boxes, once just storage, now defined the flow of the room, creating pathways and zones for cooking and preparation. With the skeletal structure of the kitchen complete, the next major step loomed: the countertops. This was a decision I had deliberated over for weeks, weighing aesthetics against durability, cost against longevity. Ultimately, I settled on a pristine white quartz, chosen for its non-porous surface, its resilience to stains and scratches, and the clean, bright aesthetic it would lend to the space. It felt like the perfect complement to the Shaker-style cabinets, a blend of classic and contemporary. The process began with meticulous measurements. Even though the cabinets were perfectly aligned, the walls themselves might not be, and any subtle deviation could throw off the entire countertop installation. I used large sheets of cardboard to create templates of every surface, carefully tracing the contours of the walls, marking the precise locations for the sink cutout and the cooktop. This wasn't merely a formality, it was a critical step that would dictate the fit of the finished product. Each template was double-checked, then triple-checked, before being handed over to the fabricator. The waiting period that followed was filled with a quiet anticipation, a pause in the physical labor, but not in the mental visualization of the finished space. When the call came that the countertops were ready, it felt like another milestone. The installation day was a symphony of careful maneuvering and precise placement. The pieces of quartz were astonishingly heavy, requiring a team of installers and specialized suction cups to lift and transport them. Each slab was gently lowered onto the cabinet bases, shims carefully placed to ensure perfect levelness. The seams where two pieces met were a testament to the fabricator's skill, virtually invisible to the eye, joined with an epoxy that would harden into an unyielding bond. As the final piece settled into place, covering the expanse of cabinets, the kitchen truly began to coalesce. The stark white of the quartz instantly brightened the room, reflecting the natural light that poured in through the window. It was no longer just a collection of boxes. It was a coherent, purposeful space. The sink cutout, a precise rectangle, now awaited its basin. With the countertops firmly in place, the focus shifted to the functional heart of the kitchen: the plumbing and electrical systems. I began by installing the undermount sink, a deep stainless steel basin that would be both practical and unobtrusive. Securing it from beneath the quartz with clips and a bead of silicone sealant required working in confined spaces, a familiar challenge in any renovation. Once the sink was in, the faucet followed, its sleek design a deliberate choice to match the modern lines of the quartz. Connecting the water supply lines and the drain required a careful hand, ensuring every joint was tight and leak-free. A small drip could quickly become a large problem, so each connection was tested and retested. The garbage disposal unit was then mounted, its hum a promise of future convenience. Simultaneously, I turned my attention to the electrical rough-ins that had been waiting patiently behind the walls. Outlets for small appliances were installed along the backsplash area, strategically placed for coffee makers, toasters, and blenders. Under cabinet lighting, a detail I had always admired in well-designed kitchens, was next. Running the low-voltage wiring discreetly, tucking it away behind the cabinet fronts, and mounting the slim LED strips transformed the work surfaces. The soft, even glow banished shadows, making food preparation safer and more enjoyable. The dedicated circuits for the range and the refrigerator were terminated with their appropriate receptacles, ready for the appliances that would soon arrive. The delivery of the major appliances was another logistical puzzle. The refrigerator, a behemoth of stainless steel, had to be carefully wheeled through the doorway, avoiding any scrapes or dents to the newly painted walls or the pristine cabinets. The range, with its dual fuel capabilities, was equally heavy and required precise positioning within its designated opening. Connecting the gas line for the cooktop and the electrical for the oven was a task that demanded absolute attention to detail, ensuring all connections were secure and tested. The dishwasher, slid into its narrow slot beside the sink, was plumbed into the water supply and drain, and its electrical connection made. Each appliance, once just a picture in a catalog, now stood as a solid, functional piece, contributing to the kitchen's growing utility. With the major components in place, the kitchen felt almost complete, yet it lacked a certain polish, a finishing layer that would tie everything together. That layer was the backsplash. I had chosen a classic white subway tile, a simple yet elegant choice that would complement the quartz and the cabinet color without overpowering them. The process of tiling, while repetitive, was deeply satisfying. I began by meticulously marking out the layout, ensuring that the first row was perfectly level. Each tile was then buttered with thin-set mortar and pressed firmly into place, spacers ensuring consistent grout lines. The corners and edges required careful cuts, often intricate shapes to fit around outlets or window frames. The rhythmic sound of the wet saw, precise and powerful, became the soundtrack to my progress. The first few rows were slow, a learning curve of pressure and placement. But as I gained momentum, the wall began to transform, a mosaic of glossy white emerging from the bare plasterboard. It was a painstaking process, requiring patience and a steady hand. Once all the tiles were set, I allowed the thinset to cure for a full 24 hours before moving on to grouting. Grouting was a messier affair, but equally transformative. Spreading the light gray grout across the tiled surface, working it into every joint, then carefully wiping away the excess, revealed the true beauty of the pattern. The grout defined each tile, giving the wall depth and texture. The final polish, after the grout had dried, left the surface gleaming, a perfect backdrop to the countertops and cabinets. The kitchen was now undeniably a kitchen, but it still needed its jewelry, the cabinet hardware. I had selected simple, brushed nickel pulls for the drawers and knobs for the cabinet doors. This seemingly small detail had a profound impact, instantly elevating the aesthetic and making the cabinets truly functional. Measuring and marking the precise location for each pull and knob required care, ensuring consistency across all fronts. Drilling the pilot holes and then securing the hardware was the final, satisfying act for each cabinet. The smooth, cool feel of the metal under my fingers as I opened a drawer or a door was a tactile confirmation of completion. Beyond the major installations, there were countless smaller tasks that collectively brought the project to its conclusion. Trim pieces around the windows were installed and painted, sealing the edges and providing a finished look. Baseboards were added, bridging the gap between the floor and the cabinets. Any minor imperfections in the paint or caulk were touched up. Every surface was meticulously cleaned, dust and debris banished, revealing the pristine finish beneath. The smell of fresh paint and new materials slowly dissipated, replaced by the clean scent of a new home. Standing back, surveying the transformed space, a profound sense of accomplishment washed over me. The kitchen, once a dilapidated shell, was now a testament to careful planning, diligent work, and a relentless pursuit of quality. Every decision, every cut, every screw had contributed to this final outcome. It was more than just a room. It was a functional work of art, a space designed to foster creativity and connection. The journey had been long, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but the reward of seeing the vision materialize, piece by painstaking piece, was immeasurable. It was ready, not just for a meal, but for a lifetime of memories. The light caught the quartz, reflected off the stainless steel, and illuminated the crisp white tiles. It was precisely as I had envisioned it, and perhaps even a little more. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the gentle click of a cabinet door closing, all spoke of a space ready to be lived in, a space that was truly home. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the gentle click of a cabinet door closing, all spoke of a space ready to be lived in, a space that was truly home. The day the last tool was packed away, the last speck of dust vacuumed, felt less like an ending and more like a profound beginning. I remember standing there, the evening light softening the edges of the pristine surfaces, a deep breath filling my lungs with the scent of newness, a subtle mix of quartz, fresh paint, and clean air. It was a scent of accomplishment, of potential. That first morning in the completed kitchen was almost sacred. I woke before the sun, a habit ingrained from months of early starts and late finishes, but this time there was no rush, no pressing deadline. The house was utterly silent, a quiet I had not known in what felt like an eternity, a silence unbroken by the whir of a saw or the thud of a hammer. I padded into the kitchen, the cool tile under my bare feet a pleasant shock. The early light, still a muted gray, filtered through the window, painting soft shadows across the countertops. I made coffee, the simple ritual elevated by the surroundings. The smooth operation of the new faucet, the satisfying click of the induction hob, the fragrant steam rising from the ceramic mug in my hands. Each sensation was amplified, tasted with a new appreciation. I sat at the island, a generous slab of quartz that felt both solid and elegant, and watched the dawn break. The sky outside shifted from slate to rose, then to a brilliant gold, illuminating every detail of the space I had so meticulously crafted. The custom cabinetry gleamed, the hardware felt substantial and smooth beneath my fingers. This was no longer a construction site, it was a sanctuary. The journey had been arduous, marked by moments of frustration, scraped knuckles, and weary bones, but in that quiet morning light, every single effort felt justified, every challenge overcome a victory. The coffee tasted better, the silence resonated with a deep peace. The first simple meal I prepared in the new kitchen was a revelation. Not a grand feast, but scrambled eggs and toast. A culinary staple, yet it felt like a gourmet experience. The space flowed effortlessly. The cutting board found its natural home on the expansive counter. The pan heated evenly on the induction cooktop, the eggs fluffy and perfect. Cleaning up was a joy, the deep sink swallowing dishes with ease, the integrated dishwasher humming quietly as it began its cycle. It was a dance, a choreography of domesticity that felt utterly natural, as if this kitchen had always existed, waiting patiently for me to discover its rhythm. Over the next few days, I moved through the house with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. The kitchen, being the heart of the home, naturally drew much of my attention, but its completion had a ripple effect. With the central hub finished, a new energy permeated the other rooms. Boxes that had been relegated to corners during the renovation were finally opened. Each item unpacked felt like a homecoming. Books returned to shelves, art found its place on walls, textiles softened the edges of furniture. It wasn't a renovation of every room, but the sheer act of settling in, of personalizing, transformed the entire structure. The house began to breathe, exhaling the dust of construction and inhaling the essence of its inhabitant. I found myself lingering in rooms I had previously only passed through. The living room, with its comfortable armchair, became a haven for reading in the afternoon sun. The light now seeming brighter, cleaner, filtering through newly washed windows. The bedroom, once a mere place to sleep, became a true retreat, its simplicity a welcome contrast to the intense focus of the kitchen project. There was a profound satisfaction in seeing the house not just as a collection of completed tasks, but as a cohesive, living entity, each space complementing the next. The kitchen's modern elegance subtly influenced the aesthetic of the adjacent rooms, inspiring a decluttering, a sharpening of focus on quality and comfort. The idea of sharing this space, this hard-won sanctuary, began to bubble up. The kitchen was designed for connection, for gathering. A dinner party, a small, intimate gathering, felt like the natural next step. I imagined the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the aroma of good food filling the air. The thought alone brought a smile to my face. I decided on a simple, comforting menu, something that would allow me to enjoy the company as much as the cooking. The preparation was a pleasure, not a chore. The ample counter space meant I could spread out, chop vegetables without feeling cramped, organize ingredients with ease. The pantry, so thoughtfully designed, held everything within easy reach. When my first guests arrived, their exclamations of delight filled the air. Their eyes widened as they took in the transformation, their hands running over the smooth quartz, peering into the deep sink, admiring the craftsmanship of the cabinetry. It wasn't just the aesthetic that impressed them, it was the palpable sense of warmth and invitation the space now exuded. The kitchen, once a cold, empty shell, now buzzed with life. The induction hob performed flawlessly, bringing pots to boil with impressive speed. The oven baked evenly, filling the house with the tantalizing scent of roasted vegetables and herbs. We gathered around the island, a natural focal point, sharing appetizers and stories. The light from the pendant fixtures cast a warm glow, creating an intimate atmosphere. Later, we moved to the dining area, which felt seamlessly connected to the kitchen, allowing conversation to flow easily between the two spaces. The meal was a success, but it was the shared experience, the joy of hospitality in a space created with such intention, that truly resonated. As the evening wound down, and I said goodbye to my friends, a deep sense of contentment settled over me. This was the ultimate reward, seeing the kitchen fulfill its purpose, not just as a place for cooking, but as a place for living, for connecting, for creating memories. The days that followed established a rhythm. Mornings began with coffee at the island, often accompanied by a book, or simply quiet contemplation as the sun climbed higher. Afternoons might involve a simple lunch, the clatter of dishes, a gentle punctuation in the quiet house. Evenings brought the comforting ritual of dinner preparation, the kitchen becoming a stage for culinary exploration. I found myself experimenting more, trying new recipes, drawn in by the sheer pleasure of working in such an efficient and beautiful environment. The organized drawers, the easily accessible spice rack, the powerful ventilation system that whisked away cooking odors, every detail contributed to a frictionless experience. The house itself seemed to settle into its new skin. The scent of newness gradually faded, replaced by the subtle composite aroma of a lived-in home. A hint of freshly brewed coffee, a lingering whisper of dinner from the night before, the faint, comforting scent of clean laundry. The quiet hum of the refrigerator became a familiar, almost comforting presence, a baseline against which the small sounds of daily life played out, the soft rustle of pages turning, the gentle chime of a clock, the distant murmur of traffic that now seemed less intrusive, more a part of the world outside my sanctuary. I discovered new favorite spots. The window seat in the living room, bathed in morning light, became a perfect place for contemplation. The small patio off the kitchen, once an afterthought, now called to me with the promise of outdoor breakfasts on warm days. Each space, even those not directly renovated, had been subtly enhanced by the overall transformation, imbued with a fresh purpose and a renewed sense of belonging. The house was no longer just a structure, it was a canvas upon which I was painting my life. The project had been more than just a renovation, it had been a journey of self-discovery. I had learned patience, resilience, and the immense satisfaction of working with my hands, bringing a vision to life from raw materials. I had faced unexpected challenges and found solutions, pushing my own boundaries and discovering a wellspring of determination I hadn't fully recognized. The house, particularly the kitchen, stood as a testament to that growth, a physical manifestation of my evolving capabilities and my deepening understanding of what truly constitutes a home. It wasn't just about aesthetics or functionality, it was about creating a space that nurtured the soul, a place of peace and inspiration. As the weeks turned into months, the initial thrill of newness matured into a deeper, more abiding sense of comfort and belonging. The kitchen, seamlessly integrated into the fabric of my daily life, no longer a focal point of intense labor, but a natural extension of myself. The quartz countertops, once pristine and untouched, now bore the faint, honorable marks of countless meals prepared, a subtle patina of life being lived. The stainless steel, still gleaming, reflected the changing light of seasons, from the crisp brightness of autumn mornings to the soft, diffused glow of winter afternoons. I found joy in the small, repetitive acts, filling the kettle, arranging groceries in the pantry, wiping down the counters after a meal. These mundane tasks, once tedious, now held a quiet reverence, each movement a reaffirmation of the care and intention poured into the space. The kitchen was not just beautiful, it was incredibly practical, every drawer and cabinet serving its purpose with quiet efficiency. There was no wasted motion, no frustrating search for a forgotten utensil. Everything had its place, a harmony born from thoughtful design. The garden, previously a neglected patch, began to call to me with a new urgency. With the indoor sanctuary established, my gaze naturally turned outwards. I envisioned herbs growing in pots near the kitchen door, a small vegetable patch, perhaps a vibrant flower bed to welcome visitors. This next phase, less about demolition and more about cultivation, felt like a natural progression. It was an extension of the same principle, creating beauty, fostering life, making the surroundings a reflection of inner peace. The house, now a haven, felt deeply connected to the natural world outside its walls. Rainy days became an opportunity to appreciate the warmth and coziness within. I would often sit at the island, a mug of tea warming my hands, listening to the gentle drumming of rain on the roof, watching the world outside blurred by moisture. The kitchen, with its carefully chosen materials and soft lighting, felt like a cocoon, a safe harbor against the elements. It was in these quiet moments that the true value of the renovation became most apparent. It wasn't just about the physical transformation, it was about the emotional sanctuary it provided. I started to host more frequently, not just formal dinners, but casual brunches, spontaneous coffee dates, or simply friends dropping by for a chat. The kitchen, with its welcoming island and open layout, naturally became the gathering spot. Conversations flowed easily, laughter echoed against the smooth surfaces, and the aroma of shared food became synonymous with warmth and camaraderie. It was a space that encouraged connection, a stage for the beautiful, messy dance of human interaction. Watching my friends and family comfortable and happy in this space, using the very elements I had poured my heart into creating, was a joy beyond measure. Their compliments, their expressions of awe, were gratifying, but the deeper satisfaction came from witnessing the space fulfill its intended purpose, to be lived in, loved, and shared. Sometimes, late at night, after everyone had left and the dishes were done, I would return to the kitchen. The soft glow of the under-cabinet lighting would illuminate the counters, casting long shadows. In those moments, the space felt almost alive, imbued with the echoes of the day's conversations, the lingering scent of food, the warmth of shared laughter. It was a quiet dialogue between creator and creation, a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the skills learned, for the vision realized. The kitchen was more than just cabinets and appliances. It was a repository of hard work, hope, and the promise of a future filled with nourishing meals and cherished memories. The project had fundamentally changed me. I was more confident, more patient, more attuned to the beauty of intentional design and the satisfaction of tangible creation. The process had taught me that even the most daunting tasks could be broken down into manageable steps, that perseverance was key, and that the greatest rewards often lay at the end of the most challenging paths. This house, this kitchen, was not just a place I lived, it was a chapter in my life, a testament to what could be achieved with dedication and a clear vision. It was a foundation, not just for a home, but for a new way of living, a deeper appreciation for the simple, profound joys of existence within a space crafted with love and purpose. The journey of renovation had concluded, but the journey of living in this transformed space was just beginning. Each new day brought fresh opportunities to appreciate its beauty, its functionality, and the quiet comfort it offered. The house had become a mirror, reflecting the care and attention I had poured into it, and in turn it poured peace and contentment back into my life. It was a symbiotic relationship, a dialogue between occupant and dwelling. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the gentle click of a cabinet door closing, now carried a new resonance, a deeper meaning. They were the sounds of a life unfolding, of a future being built, one cherished moment at a time, within the walls of a home that was truly, wonderfully mine. The lingering scent of a freshly baked loaf of bread, an experiment in the new oven, filled the air, a comforting aroma that spoke of warmth and sustenance. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool surface of the quartz, feeling the solidity of it, the permanence. This was a space built to last, to endure, to be the backdrop for countless future moments, both grand and mundane. There was a profound sense of rightness, of being exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by the fruits of my labor. The initial adrenaline of completion had long since settled into a steady, comforting hum of domestic contentment. I often found myself simply standing in the kitchen, gazing out the window at the changing seasons, a cup of tea warming my hands. The sight of autumn leaves turning fiery red and gold, or the gentle descent of winter snow framed by the crisp lines of the new window, brought a quiet joy. The kitchen, with its thoughtful design, felt intrinsically connected to the world outside, inviting the natural light and the beauty of the landscape in. It was a place of contemplation as much as creation, a space where thoughts could roam free while hands were busy with the familiar rhythms of cooking or cleaning. The tools that once cluttered the space, the saws and drills and sanders, were now neatly stored away in the garage, silent witnesses to the transformation. Their absence was a welcome relief, a sign that the phase of intense labor was over, replaced by the gentler art of living. Yet I felt a quiet respect for them, for the instruments that had helped bring my vision to life. They represented a chapter, a learning curve, a period of intense focus and physical exertion that had ultimately led to this profound sense of peace. I had begun to think about the next small projects around the house. Not major renovations, but enhancements, personal touches. Perhaps a new coat of paint in the hallway, or building a small bookshelf for the living room. The confidence gained from the kitchen project had empowered me, made me realize that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. The fear of tackling something new had diminished, replaced by a quiet eagerness to learn and to create. The house was no longer a series of isolated tasks, but a continuous canvas, evolving with me. The mornings became a cherished ritual. The sun, a faithful companion, would stream through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the subtle grain of the wood cabinetry, catching the sparkle of the stainless steel. I would brew coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, and sit at the island, sometimes reading, sometimes simply observing the quiet awakening of the house. These moments of solitude were precious, a time for reflection and gratitude, a chance to ground myself before the day began. Evenings, too, held their own magic. The soft glow of the under-cabinet lighting, the warmth radiating from the induction hob. The soft glow of the under-cabinet lighting, the warmth radiating from the induction hob, created an inviting tableau. I would often prepare a simple meal, savoring the process, the scent of herbs mingling with the lingering coffee aroma, a symphony of domesticity. The kitchen, once a symbol of my apprehension, had become a sanctuary, a testament to my burgeoning capabilities. It was a space where I felt utterly at ease, a place of nourishment not just for the body, but for the spirit. The sleek surfaces, the thoughtful layout, the hidden conveniences, all contributed to a sense of calm efficiency that permeated my evenings. Sometimes I would linger there, a book open, a cup of tea steaming, listening to the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the quiet breathing of the house around me. These moments were a balm, a quiet celebration of progress and peace. With the kitchen complete, a new energy stirred within me. The success had been exhilarating, but it also, with the kitchen complete, a new energy stirred within me. The success had been exhilarating, but it also unveiled a deeper truth about the house and, by extension, about myself. The kitchen, sparkling and efficient, stood in stark contrast to the rest of the dwelling, which now seemed to whisper its own needs, its own neglected corners, It was as if by illuminating one room, I had cast shadows upon others, not of darkness, but of potential, of unfulfilled promise. The initial apprehension that had once paralyzed me, the fear of the unknown, of making mistakes, had been largely dispelled. In its place was a burgeoning confidence, a quiet certainty that I could learn, adapt, and ultimately transform. The house was no longer a monument to my past insecurities, but a canvas awaiting my touch, a series of challenges I was now eager to embrace. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the oven, these were not just mechanical sounds. They were the symphony of a house awakening, and I, its conductor. My gaze began to wander, less critically than before, more with a sense of curious assessment. The main bathroom, for instance. It was functional, certainly, but utterly devoid of character. The pale blue tiles, chosen decades ago, seemed to absorb all light, making the space feel cramped and perpetually dim. The pedestal sink, chipped in one corner, and the standard-issue bathtub offered no invitation to linger. It was a room for necessity, not for solace. And after creating a kitchen that was both practical and profoundly comforting, the idea of a purely utilitarian bathroom felt almost anachronistic within my evolving home. I found myself idly sketching designs on napkins during my morning coffee, browsing online galleries of modern bathrooms, envisioning sleek lines, natural materials, and clever storage solutions. The scope seemed daunting at first. Plumbing, waterproofing, tiling a much larger surface area than the kitchen backsplash. These were skills I had barely touched upon, but the memory of the initial fear surrounding the kitchen and how I had systematically dismantled it, piece by piece, gave me courage. I told myself that if I could learn to install cabinets and wire a new circuit, I could certainly tackle a bathroom. The process began much like the kitchen project, with intensive research. I immersed myself in the world of sanitary ware, shower systems, and underfloor heating. I learned about different types of tiles, porcelain versus ceramic, matte versus glossy, and the importance of proper substrate preparation. I spent hours watching instructional videos, pausing and rewinding to grasp the nuances of waterproofing membranes and waste pipe configurations. My evenings were no longer solely for savoring the kitchen's tranquility. They were now dedicated to planning the next conquest. I visited showrooms, running my hand over various textures of tiles, imagining how the light would play across them. I considered the flow of the room, the placement of the toilet, the shower, the vanity. I wanted a space that felt open, airy, and yet deeply private, a place where one could truly unwind. The idea of a walk-in shower, with a rainfall head, began to take root, along with a sleek, wall-mounted vanity to maximize floor space. I envisioned soft, ambient lighting, perhaps integrated into a large mirror, and a subtle warmth emanating from the floor on chilly mornings. The outlets that were incorrectly wired. I found junction boxes that were buried behind drywall, a huge fire hazard, and a massive code violation. I spent an entire day just identifying which breakers controlled which outlets and lights, only to find that some circuits were inexplicably tied together, defying any logical pattern. It was a patchwork quilt of hazards. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not live in a house with this electrical system. It had to be completely gutted and rewired from scratch, a task that felt utterly beyond my capabilities at that moment. And then there were the walls. Oh, the walls. Beyond the waviness, I discovered that some sections of drywall had been installed directly over old, crumbling plaster without any attempt to remove the old material or properly prep the surface. This meant that even if I painted them, the underlying instability would eventually cause cracks and paint failure. In other areas, the drywall screws were either too deep, tearing through the paper, or not deep enough, leaving proud screw heads. The mudding and taping, where it existed, was haphazard, with visible seams and uneven patches. It was clear that none of it would provide a smooth, durable surface for paint or wallpaper. It was a complete tear-out. Every single sheet of drywall they had put up would have to come down. The flooring, which had been the catalyst for my decision, was exactly as I feared. No vapor barrier, no underlayment, just hardwood nailed directly to the subfloor. I learned that engineered hardwood, while more stable than solid hardwood, still requires proper installation techniques to prevent buckling and cupping. This floor was destined for failure. It, too, would have to be removed. Every single plank. As I walked through the house, notebook in hand, documenting the wreckage, a strange thing happened. The initial despair began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of clarity and, dare I say, excitement. It was a daunting task, yes, but it was also a clean slate. I could fix this, I could make it right, and in doing so, I would learn skills I never thought I'd possess. This wasn't just a renovation anymore, it was an education, a personal challenge, a journey of empowerment. The first practical step was demolition, but this time it was term and nigh demolition. Controlled, methodical, and purposeful. I started with the easiest things first, the bits of trim and the crooked outlets. I bought a pry bar, a good hammer, and a heavy-duty shop vac. I put on my safety glasses, my thick gloves, and a dust mask. And I started to undo. It felt incredibly cathartic. Each piece of poorly installed material I removed was a small victory. The sound of drywall ripping from studs, the clang of pipes hitting the floor, the satisfying thud of a crooked cabinet being dismantled. It was all music to my ears. I started with the drywall. I learned how to score it with a budget, of course, was a consideration, but I had learned from the kitchen that investing in quality materials and taking my time to do the job right paid dividends in both longevity and satisfaction. I also realized that by doing much of the labor myself, I was saving a significant portion of the cost, allowing me to splurge on certain elements that truly elevated the space. The kitchen had taught me the value of patience and the profound joy of craftsmanship. Finally, after weeks of planning, ordering, and strategic stockpiling of materials in the spare room, the day came to begin the demolition. I approached the old bathroom with a mixture of excitement and a touch of nostalgic farewell. This room, however uninspiring, had served its purpose for years. I gathered my tools, a sledgehammer, crowbar, safety goggles, and thick gloves. The first swing of the hammer against the old tiles was surprisingly cathartic. Dust billowed, and the sound echoed through the house, a declaration of intent. Peeling away the layers of the past was a messy, physically demanding job. The old tiles came off with varying degrees of resistance, some shattering easily, others clinging stubbornly to the plasterboard. The sink and toilet were disconnected and removed, leaving behind ghostly outlines on the wall and floor. The bathtub, a heavy cast-iron beast, required considerable effort to maneuver out of the room and eventually out of the house. Each piece removed felt like shedding an old skin, making way for something new, something better. Beneath the surface, I encountered the inevitable surprises that come with older homes. Some sections of plasterboard were damp and crumbling, necessitating their complete removal and replacement. The floorboards beneath the vinyl were uneven in places, requiring leveling compounds to ensure a perfectly flat surface for the new tiles. There was an old, defunct electrical conduit running behind one wall, a relic of a previous renovation which I carefully kept and abandoned. These unforeseen challenges, which might have once sent me into a spiral of despair, were now merely puzzles to solve. I consulted my newfound online communities, watched more specific tutorials, and learned to adapt. Each small victory, each problem overcome, fueled my determination. The bathroom was stripped bare, a skeletal framework of studs and exposed pipes. It looked utterly desolate, a raw wound in the heart of the house. But I saw not desolation, but potential. This was the blank canvas I had envisioned. The next phase involved preparing the surfaces, reboarding walls with moisture-resistant plasterboard, ensuring all electrical wiring for new lights and extractor fans was in place, and most critically, applying the waterproofing membrane. This last step was meticulous, a multi-layered process that felt like painting the room in liquid rubber, ensuring every seam and corner was sealed against any future leaks. I took immense pride in this, knowing that the invisible work was often the most important. The tiling began with the floor. I carefully measured, snapped chalk lines, and mixed the adhesive to the perfect consistency. Laying the large format porcelain tiles required precision and patience. Each tile had to be perfectly aligned, level, and evenly spaced. I used spacers, a spirit level, and a rubber mallet, tapping gently to seat each piece firmly. The first few rows were slow, agonizingly deliberate, but as I found my rhythm, the process became almost meditative. The geometric pattern emerged, transforming the bare subfloor into a smooth, elegant surface. The cool gray tones I had chosen immediately brightened the space, reflecting the ambient light. Then came the walls. Tiling vertical surfaces presented its own set of challenges. Gravity was my enemy, trying to pull down newly set tiles before the adhesive could cure. I used temporary supports and worked in smaller sections, allowing each row to set before adding the next. The walk-in shower area demanded even greater attention, with precise cuts needed around the mixer valve and the niche I had decided to build into the wall for toiletries. This niche, a small recessed shelf, felt like a touch of luxury, a testament to thoughtful design. Cutting the tiles, especially for the intricate corners of the niche, required a wet saw, a tool I had initially been intimidated by but quickly mastered, enjoying the satisfying spray of water and the clean, precise cuts it produced. There were moments of frustration, of course. A tile would crack during cutting, a row would be slightly off, requiring careful removal and resetting. My hands became accustomed to the gritty texture of grout, the stickiness of adhesive. My knees ached from hours spent kneeling. But with each challenge, I found a deeper well of resilience. I remembered the advice I had once read, that renovation was less about perfection and more about persistence, and I persisted. As the tiling neared completion, the room began to shed its industrial, construction site feel and slowly, beautifully reveal its true form. The large format tiles, with their subtle veining, created a seamless, expansive look, making the small bathroom feel considerably larger. The light, which had once been swallowed by the old blue tiles, now bounced around the room, making it bright and inviting. Next came the installation of the fixtures. The wall-mounted vanity, with its clean lines and integrated basin, was carefully secured. The choice of a wall-mounted unit was deliberate, creating an illusion of space by keeping the floor clear beneath it. The sleek, minimalist faucet, a waterfall design, added a touch of modern elegance. The toilet, also wall-mounted with a concealed cistern, further enhanced the streamlined aesthetic. I learned about flexible connectors, compression fittings, and the importance of leak testing at every stage. Each connection, each turn of a wrench, was performed with an almost surgical precision, knowing that one oversight could lead to disaster. The walk-in shower was the centerpiece. The frameless glass panel was carefully installed, creating an open, airy feel. The rainfall shower head and a separate handheld spray unit were fitted, their chrome surfaces gleaming. The underfloor heating mat, which I had laid before the floor tiles, was connected to a programmable thermostat, promising a luxurious warmth underfoot. The final touches included the installation of a powerful extractor fan, recessed LED spotlights that provided bright, even illumination, and a large, backlit mirror above the vanity, which further expanded the sense of space. The day the bathroom was finally complete felt like a triumph on par with the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. The subtle aroma of freshly cleaned tiles and newly installed fixtures filled the air. The room was transformed from a drab necessity into a serene sanctuary. The soft glow from the mirror, the pristine white of the basin, the cool gray of the tiles, all contributed to a feeling of calm and understated luxury. It was a space designed for relaxation, a place to shed the day's stresses. That evening I took my first shower in the new bathroom. The warmth of the underfloor heating was immediate and comforting. The rainfall shower enveloped me in a gentle cascade of water, and the powerful extractor fan whisked away the steam. It was an experience, not just a routine. The sense of accomplishment was profound, a deep satisfaction that permeated every pore. I had built this. My hands, my effort, my persistence had created this beautiful, functional space. The bathroom, like the kitchen before it, was more than just a renovated room. It was another testament to my evolving capabilities, a physical manifestation of my journey from apprehension to empowerment. The house was slowly but surely shedding its skin, revealing the home it was always meant to be, a reflection of the person I was becoming. Each project, each challenge overcome, was a brick laid in the foundation of a new sense of self. I found myself lingering in the bathroom, just as I did in the kitchen. Sometimes, after a long day, I would run a bath, adding bath salts and lighting a candle, allowing the warm water and the serene atmosphere to wash away any lingering tension. The quiet breathing of the house, once a source of unease, now felt like a comforting presence, a silent companion in my ongoing transformation. The gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the soft whir of the extractor fan in the bathroom, these were the sounds of a living, breathing home, a home that was truly mine. With the kitchen and the main bathroom complete, a distinct pattern emerged in my approach to the house. The initial fear of imperfection had been replaced by a pragmatic understanding that challenges were inherent in renovation, and that overcoming them was part of the reward. My hands, once hesitant, were now accustomed to the feel of tools, the texture of raw materials, the satisfaction of a job well done. I was no longer merely occupying the space. I was actively shaping it, imbuing it with my own vision and effort. My attention naturally drifted to other areas. The small guest bathroom, a relic of the 1980s, with its avocado green suite and floral wallpaper, presented another opportunity. While not as high a priority as the main bathroom, its dated appearance now seemed jarring against the sleek modernity of the other renovated spaces. I began to mentally strip it down, imagining a more compact, efficient design, perhaps a wet room concept, to maximize the limited space. The planning for this next project felt less like an arduous task and more like a familiar, welcome ritual. Beyond the aesthetics, the act of renovation had instilled in me a deeper appreciation for the mechanics of a home. I understood the intricacies of plumbing, the logic of electrical circuits, the importance of structural integrity. I could diagnose minor issues, perform basic repairs, and approach larger projects with a clear strategy rather than blind panic. This newfound practical knowledge was empowering, extending beyond the physical structure of the house into a broader sense of self-reliance. I also noticed a shift in my personal habits. The discipline required for renovation, the meticulous planning, the consistent effort, the problem-solving, had subtly spilled into other areas of my life. My workspace became more organized, my daily routines more structured. There was a quiet confidence in my demeanor, a sense of having earned my stripes through tangible achievement. The house was not just being rebuilt. I was, in a way, rebuilding myself alongside it. The evenings, especially, continued to be a cherished time. After a day of work, whether at my professional job or on the house, returning to the order and beauty I had created was a profound comfort. I would often make myself a simple, wholesome meal in the kitchen, enjoying the clean lines and efficient appliances, then perhaps retreat to the living room, which, though not yet fully renovated, felt more welcoming simply by virtue of its proximity to the completed spaces. I would read, listen to music, or simply sit in quiet contemplation, the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the quiet breathing of the house serving as a soothing backdrop. Sometimes, I would find myself walking through the renovated rooms, touching the smooth surfaces of the countertops, admiring the precise grout lines in the bathroom, feeling the warmth of the underfloor heating. These were not acts of vanity, but of quiet pride, a recognition of how far I had come. Each room was a chapter in my story, a tangible record of growth and transformation. The apprehension that had once clouded my days had been systematically replaced by capability, by a sense of purpose, and by a profound peace found in the act of creation. The house was no longer merely a place to live, it was a testament to the journey of becoming. It was a home, in every sense of the word, built not just with wood and plaster, but with newfound courage and unwavering determination. The house, now fully inhabited by its renewed spirit, hummed with a quiet energy. Every surface, every corner, held a memory of effort and triumph. There was no grand unveiling, no dramatic utility knife, how to snap it cleanly, how to pull it off the studs without making an even bigger mess. I discovered the joy of a good reciprocating saw for cutting through stubborn sections and for removing old, rusty nails. The dust was immense, a constant, pervasive presence that coated everything. But as the poorly installed sheets came down, a sense of relief washed over me. I could see the bare studs again, the bones of the house, and more importantly, I could see where the asterisk real problems lay, hidden behind the contractor's shoddy work. Removing the plumbing was a bit more challenging. PEX is relatively easy to cut, but dealing with the old galvanized pipes was a brute force effort. I learned about pipe wrenches, about cutting wheels, about the sheer weight of old metal. I discovered why plumbers charge what they do. It's hard, dirty work, often in cramped, awkward spaces. But as each sagging, incorrectly routed pipe was removed, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was progress. This was getting it right. The electrical, however, I knew was beyond my comfort zone for demolition. While I could identify the problem areas, I wasn't confident in safely disconnecting and removing live wires. This was one of the few areas where I decided to call in a professional. I found a local, licensed electrician who came highly recommended. He listened patiently as I explained the saga, showed him my detailed notes and photos. He confirmed my fears. The entire system was a hazard. He spent a full week carefully de-energizing, disconnecting, and removing the old, dangerous wiring. It was a significant expense, but one I considered non-negotiable for safety. Watching him work, I absorbed everything I could, asking questions, understanding the logic behind proper wiring, the importance of grounding, the correct way to size circuits. It was my first real lesson in professional craftsmanship, a stark contrast to what I had endured. Once the house was essentially stripped back to the studs, a clean but daunting canvas, the real work began. The rebuilding. This was where the determination truly kicked in, fueled by countless hours of research. YouTube became my university, home improvement forums, my study groups, and books on residential construction, my textbooks. I devoured information on everything from framing techniques to drywall finishing, from plumbing codes to electrical standards. I watched videos late into the night, replaying sections, taking notes, visualizing each step. I became fluent in terms like plumb, level, square, joist hangers, shear walls, GFI, AFCI, and so many more. I started with the structural issues. The undersized beam in the living room was my first major project. I consulted with a structural engineer, another professional I brought in to ensure safety and code compliance. He designed a proper beam, specifying the correct dimensions and installation method. This was a job that required heavy lifting and careful precision. I rented a couple of adjustable support jacks, painstakingly measured and cut the new lumber, and with the help of a very strong friend, hoisted the massive beam into place. Securing it with heavy-duty joist hangers and fasteners was a workout, but when it was done, and the floor above felt solid again, the sense of accomplishment was immense. It was the first tangible proof that I could tackle something truly challenging. With the structural integrity addressed, I moved on to framing corrections. The contractor's wavy walls weren't just cosmetically bad. Many studs were out of plumb, twisted, or improperly spaced. I learned how to use a plumb bob and a long level to identify the offenders. I carefully removed and reset studs, sometimes adding cripple studs or blocking to provide proper backing for future drywall or cabinets. It was meticulous work, slow and often frustrating, but I knew that a perfectly square and plumb frame was the foundation for everything else. No amount of drywall mud or paint could hide a fundamentally crooked wall. I learned the satisfaction of seeing a laser line perfectly trace a true vertical, knowing that I had achieved it through my own effort. Next came the rough-ins, plumbing and electrical. Having watched the professional electrician, I felt more confident in tackling the new wiring myself, under his guidance for the final hookup and inspection. I bought rolls of Romex, dozens of junction boxes, and a dizzying array of connectors, staples, and tools. I meticulously planned out every circuit, every outlet, every light switch, drawing it all out on paper first. I learned about load calculations, about keeping circuits balanced, about the proper way to strip wires and make secure connections. Each run of wire was stapled neatly along the studs, each box securely mounted, each connection double-checked. It was a painstaking process, but knowing that I was building a safe, reliable electrical system filled me with a deep sense of purpose. I even installed smart home wiring for future upgrades, thinking ahead, something the original contractor would never have considered. The plumbing was equally detailed. I invested in a PEX crimping tool and learned how to make perfect, leak-proof connections. I rerouted all the supply lines, ensuring proper support every 32 inches, maintaining consistent pressure, and designing a manifold system that allowed for easy shutoff of individual fixtures. For the drainage, I learned about proper slope, about vent pipes, about the importance of cleanouts. It was a puzzle, fitting all the pieces together in a way that was efficient, effective, and code-compliant. I spent hours under the house, in crawl spaces, contorting myself into uncomfortable positions, running new drain lines and tying them into the main stack. There were moments of utter despair when a connection stubbornly refused to seal, when a newly installed pipe showed a slow, agonizing drip after a pressure test, or when a PVC joint, despite my careful application of primer and cement, twisted just a fraction of an inch too far, compromising its integrity and forcing me to cut it out and start again. Each setback was a lesson in humility, a stark reminder that even the most meticulous planning could be undone by a single tiny error. I learned to curse under my breath, to walk away for an hour, to recalibrate my approach. I learned that patience was not just a virtue, but an absolute necessity in this line of work. But then came the victories. The triumphant moment when a section of drain pipe, perfectly sloped, snaked its way through a maze of joists and beams, connecting seamlessly to the main stack. The satisfaction of hearing the water rush through the PEX lines during a final pressure test, holding steady at 100 psi for hours, not a single drop escaping. I had installed a whole-house water filtration system, a pressure-reducing valve to protect my new fixtures, and a tankless water heater that promised endless hot water efficiency. Every faucet, every shower head, every toilet now had its own dedicated supply line, easily isolatable at the manifold. It was a plumbing system designed not just to function, but to excel, to last, to be easily maintained for decades to come. The quiet hum of the well pump, the gentle gurgle of a perfectly vented drain, these were the new symphonies of my home, composed by my own hands. With the core infrastructure of electricity and plumbing largely complete, or at least roughed in and tested, my focus shifted to enclosing the skeleton of the house. Insulation was next. I spent days researching the various types: fiberglass, mineral wool, spray foam. Each had its pros and cons, its R value, its installation challenges. Given the age of the house and my desire for superior thermal performance and sound dampening, I settled on a combination. For the exterior walls and ceiling, I chose closed-cell spray foam. It was a bigger investment and required professional application, but its air-sealing properties and high R value per inch were unmatched. I meticulously air-sealed every penetration, every seam, every crack before the spray foam crew arrived. I wanted to give them the cleanest, tightest envelope to work with. Watching the foam expand and fill every cavity, creating a monolithic, airtight barrier, was deeply satisfying. It transformed the cold, drafty shell into something solid, quiet, and insulated. The house instantly felt different, a profound silence settling in after the noisy work of construction. For the interior walls, for soundproofing between rooms and floors, I opted for mineral wool bats. This was a job I could do myself. It was denser than fiberglass, less itchy, and offered excellent acoustic properties in addition to thermal insulation. I spent days cutting and fitting these heavy bats, painstakingly ensuring no gaps, no compressions, no thermal bridges. It was tedious, dirty work, wearing a full respirator and protective clothing, but I understood its importance. The goal was not just to keep heat in or out, but to create a truly comfortable, quiet living space. Once the insulation was in, the house was ready for drywall. This was a stage one had approached with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Drywall is where the rough carpentry gives way to finished surfaces, where the raw bones of the house begin to take on the appearance of a home. It is also notoriously difficult to do well, the sheer scale of it, the heavy sheets, the endless cutting, hanging, taping, mudding, sanding, and remudding. I watched countless videos, read countless articles, and practiced my technique on scrap pieces. I invested in good tools, a drywall lift, a banjo taper, various knives, mud pans, and a powerful dust extractor for sanding. Hanging the sheets was physically demanding. Each 4x12 sheet of 5/8 inch drywall felt like a lead blanket, especially when trying to lift it overhead for ceilings. I learned the rhythm of scoring and snapping, of using a router bit to cut around electrical boxes with precision. Every screw had to be driven just so, dimpling the paper without breaking it. There was a method to it, a dance between brute force and delicate touch. I started with the ceilings, then the walls, always working from top to bottom, leaving the trickiest cuts for last. My shoulders ached, my hands were raw, but with each completed wall, I felt a surge of accomplishment. The transformation was undeniable. The exposed studs and wires vanished, replaced by smooth, clean surfaces. Then came the mudding and taping, the true artistry of drywall. This was where perfectionists were made or broken. I learned to apply the first thin coat of mud, embedding the paper tape over seams, striving for a perfectly flat, even surface. It was a messy process, mud getting everywhere, but I found a strange meditative quality in the repetitive strokes of the trowel. Each subsequent coat, feathered out wider and thinner, built up the surface, gradually hiding the tape and the screw heads. I learned about drying times, about the importance of humidity, about mixing mud to the perfect consistency. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, and days when every stroke seemed to leave a ridge or a bubble. I scraped, I reapplied, I sanded. Sanding was the worst part. The fine white dust permeated everything, clinging to my skin, my hair, my clothes, despite the respirator and dust extractor. It was an exercise in patience and persistence, sanding until the walls were perfectly smooth to the touch, until there were no visible bumps or ridges. I used a large shop light to cast shadows, revealing every imperfection, every subtle wave in the surface. I would sand, prime, find more imperfections, patch, sand again, and prime again. It was an iterative process, demanding an almost obsessive attention to detail, but the result, slowly emerging from the dust, was worth it. Walls that felt like polished stone, seamless and ready for paint. It was no longer just a house, it was becoming a canvas. With the drywall complete, the house felt enclosed, solid, and ready for the next layer of finishing. The floors were next on my list. The original subfloor, while structurally sound, was far from perfect. There were squeaks, uneven spots, and the occasional soft patch where water damage had occurred decades ago. My first task was to address these issues. I walked every square inch of the subfloor, identifying every squeak, every creak. I screwed down hundreds of additional screws, pulling the plywood tightly to the joists below, eliminating almost every complaint from the old house. For the uneven spots, I used a self-leveling compound, carefully mixing and pouring it to create a perfectly flat base, essential for the longevity and appearance of any finished flooring. The choice of flooring was another critical decision. For the main living areas and bedrooms, I decided on engineered hardwood. I loved the warmth and classic look of wood, and engineered planks offered greater stability in varying humidity compared to solid hardwood, which was important in my climate. I selected a wide plank, light oak with a matte finish. For the bathrooms and laundry room, I opted for large format porcelain tile, chosen for its durability, water resistance, and clean aesthetic. Installing the engineered hardwood was a precise art. I learned about expansion gaps, about staggering seams for a natural look, about using a tapping block and a mallet to seat each plank snugly. The first few rows were the slowest, requiring meticulous alignment and measurement. As I gained confidence, a rhythm emerged. The rhythmic click of the tongue and groove, the satisfying thud of the mallet, the whine of the miter saw as I cut planks to fit. Each piece laid down brought me closer to the vision of a finished room. It was a physical manifestation of progress, a tangible layer of beauty being added to the raw structure. I took immense pride in the tight seams, the straight lines, the way the light played across the grain of the wood. The house was no longer just a project. It was my home taking shape, piece by painstakingly placed piece. Tiling the bathrooms presented a different set of challenges. It involved precise layout, careful measurement, and the messy, unforgiving nature of thin-set mortar and grout. I learned to use a laser level to ensure perfectly straight lines, even on slightly uneven walls. I practiced back-buttering each large format tile to ensure full coverage and prevent hollow spots. The wet saw became my constant companion, its diamond blade humming as it cut through porcelain with surprising ease, creating perfectly straight edges and intricate L-cuts around corners and fixtures. Grouting was the final, transformative step. The dark gray grout I chose made the white tiles pop, defining each one and creating a crisp, clean surface. It was a dirty job, pushing the wet grout into the joints, then carefully cleaning the excess, but the satisfaction of seeing the finished, gleaming surface was immense. Every detail, from the perfectly mitered corners of the baseboards to the precisely cut tile around the toilet flange, spoke of countless hours of effort and an unwavering commitment to quality. As the interior finishes began to take shape, the house started to feel less like a construction site and more like a sanctuary. The smell of fresh wood and new paint replaced the lingering scent of dust and old plaster. Each completed room was a small victory, a testament to what I had learned and accomplished. There were still countless tasks ahead: cabinetry, trim work, painting, light fixtures, final plumbing fixtures. But the major foundational elements were now in place, built to a standard that far exceeded anything a typical contractor would have delivered. This was not just a renovation. It was an act of creation, a deep dive into the craft of building, and a profound journey of self-discovery. Every nail, every wire, every pipe, every tile was a direct extension of my will, my learning, and my unwavering desire to build something truly exceptional, a home that would stand strong and true for generations. The sheer scale of the undertaking had at times felt overwhelming, a mountain of tasks that seemed to grow rather than shrink. There were days when fatigue set in, when the repetitive nature of a particular job felt mind-numbing, or when a mistake required hours of backtracking and redoing. But even in those moments, the underlying purpose never wavered. I was not just fixing a house. I was reclaiming a space, infusing it with intention, and proving to myself that I was capable of far more than I ever imagined. The house was becoming a physical manifestation of my growth, a testament to the power of persistent learning and dedicated effort. Each finished section, each perfectly installed component, whispered a quiet reassurance that the vision was not just attainable, but was actively being realized, one meticulous step at a time. The original ramshackle structure was slowly but surely fading into memory, replaced by a structure of integrity and enduring quality, a silent monument to the tireless pursuit of excellence. The pursuit of excellence, however, was not a smooth upward climb. It was a winding path, often obscured by the next daunting challenge. With the structural integrity firmly established and the exterior shell largely sealed against the elements, my attention turned inward, to the unseen arteries and nerves that would bring the house to life. Electrical work. The very phrase carried a certain gravitas, a hint of danger, and the absolute necessity of perfection. Unlike framing or plumbing, where a visible leak or sag would betray a mistake, faulty wiring could lie dormant, a silent threat. Or worse, manifest in a catastrophic failure. I approached this phase with a heightened sense of caution, devouring textbooks and online tutorials, sketching circuit diagrams until my hands ached. Each outlet, each switch, each light fixture represented a node in a complex network, demanding precise calculations of load, gauge, and pathway. The old house